Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for attending the April meeting of the Toronto Police Services Board. The meeting is properly constituted and I call it to order. I ask my colleagues if there are any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Upala?
No conflict, just wanted to acknowledge that one of my colleagues from the mental health sector is on the deputations list. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, hearing none, may we have confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on March 22nd? Ms. Mueller, seconded Councillor Lee, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. Before I get into first we have a swearing in and a new member, but I do want to comment on two things. First of all, Councillor Carroll resigned in the between meetings. Councillor Carroll was on this committee for a number of years and made an invaluable contribution. But the other person this is his last meeting is Councillor Chin Lee, who, Councillor Lee, you have been on twice with me, appointed and then off and then reappointed. But having worked with you now over a number of years, I can attest to the spectacular contribution that you've made. You always come prepared. You always have the community interest at heart. You always participate fully and frankly. I've learned a heck of a lot from working with you, and I've enjoyed working with you, and I wish you every success going forward. But I just want to compliment you and thank you for all the hours you put in here and the great judgment you've provided. And recognize that this is your final board meeting. So, thank you.
Can I just say a few words? And it was great to be able to come back after my first stint for 2 years. And now I've served almost 4 years, and we selected a new chief. Well, Chief, I wish you all the best, and 3 new deputies. So the management has really changed a lot, and we're going through transformation, so it's been good to be part of that, and working with all of you, with the chair, Andy, that, when he took on the role of vice chair, he didn't know that he'd be chair when the chair left, okay? So it's great to work with all of you, and the staff at the board has been great. That has also changed, and it's been good. And all the staff here, TPS, the association, I've had meetings with the president of TPA, and it's been a great experience. And without sitting here, I would not have known how the police department works. I mean, a lot of things, you come to understand why things are the way they are and how things are handled. So I think with the new member, Jim Hart here, is also learning a lot of things as we go along. And it's great, and I wish all of you success. And I think we need to be successful for the community out there in terms of public safety and transform the police services to make sure that the people are looked after. Thank you for all your support and your help. Thank you.
So I've mentioned Councillor Carroll. Councillor Carroll also made an invaluable contribution over not quite as long a period of time, but Shelley brought a lot of experience to the board, including her time, I guess, as budget chief, the councillor responsible for that. And, she took our first budget consultations into the public domain for the Toronto Police Board and held the town hall on that, and was an active participant, so we'll miss her. But we have Councillor Hart to swear in a minute. But before we do that, we have a deputation to hear. And Miguel, that's you, I think. So, you know the rules. Please come and join us.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say about Councillor Carroll's contribution to this board was unforgettable. I think she did a lot of work for the community, but she fell short in a few areas relating to police brutality. Well, anyway, I hope William Hart, as you take over her chair, I think you're going to wear big shoes. So welcome to this board. And I want to let you know that I'm here to make a second request. You know that to get Wi-Fi, it took 4 years to have free Wi-Fi for everybody at this committee. Board. So now I'm going to ask you again. I'm asking you, Chairman Pringle, to allow to incorporate the acknowledgement of the land as is done at City Hall, at the City Executive, Mayor Tory read the acknowledgement of the land. We want to see that happening here at the Police Services Board in order to build bridges, in order to build reconciliation with First Nations. It's something that is so easy. It's procedural, right? So I hope that you, Chairman Pringle, take into consideration my second request. And I have a letter to, please, Mr. To Mayor Tory, one for Mr. Saunders.
You're a little off topic, Miguel, but
These letters are very important, because I want to meet with you guys, if it's possible, in private. It's just a matter for you view only. If you can arrange a meeting, I will really appreciate it, because what's happening at DCSE needs to be reviewed. As the police services executes the order of aging of the landlord, there are some things that need to be reviewed for the betterment of residents living in community housing. Thank you so much.
Yep.
That's it. Thank you.
okay, Miguel, thank you. Any colleagues, any questions of Miguel? Thank you for your suggestion. We'll take it under advisement. We are also still hoping to get the court case, the back, because we want to take our meetings outside of police headquarters and take our meetings, as Mayor Tory has been able to do with his executive committee, into the community. So, Carol, where do we sit on an update on that?
We've heard nothing so far, none
Okay,
whatsoever.
okay. Okay. We've heard nothing so far, Derek. Hey, Councillor Hart, if you come forward and we do the oath, the swearing in. Could read the first motion. There's the Bible first of all. I'll figure that one down.
I solemnly swear that I will be loyal to Her Majesty the Queen and to Canada, and that I will uphold the Constitution of Canada, and that I will, to the best of my ability, discharge my duties as a member of the Toronto Police Services Board, faithfully, impartially, and according to the Police Services Act, and any other act, and any regulation, rule, or bylaw, so help me God.
And the oath of secrecy?
The oath of secrecy. I solemnly swear that I will not disclose any information obtained by me in the course of my duties as a member of the Toronto Police Services Board, except as I may be authorized or required by law. So help me God.
Thank you. You want to sign those? Great. Thank you. Jim, welcome, and thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for joining us.
Thank you.
We look forward to it.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, you being a courteous and considerate man, you failed to mention that he's being sworn in, but I'm not so courteous or considerate, being sworn in on the occasion of his 60th birthday. That's a happy occasion. It's a happy occasion. There's nothing wrong with being over 60.
Yes, I did respect Councillor Hart's wishes,
No,
but
not
thank
me.
you, Mayor Tory.
No
I know you
chance.
wouldn't.
It's his birthday.
I mentioned to somebody not to say anything about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he is a politician. Okay, thank you, and Jim, welcome again. So let's go through, we have a number of presentations, but let's go through the agenda first. Item number 5 is a presentation. Item number 6, the same. Item number 7, item number 8. Item number 9 is motion to receive, that's the annual report on the use of conducted energy weapons. May I have a motion to receive? Hold, okay, hold, Ms. Senator Casera. Item number 10 is a hold. Item number 11, the nominee, the Ontario Association of Police Services Boards, motion to approve. We have to name them, so we will hold that. Okay. Item number 12, the approval of expenses, the Ontario Association of Police Services Boards, a motion to approve. Councillor Lee, seconded Mayor Tory, all in favor? Carried. Item number 13, there's a written submission, so we'll hold. Item number 14 is the New Toronto Police Services Board use of resources during the election period. Motion to approve. Councillor Hart, seconded. Councillor Lee, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Item number 15 is a hold. Item number 16 is the Parking Enforcement Unit budget variance. Motion to approve. Councillor Hart, seconded Mayor Tory, all in favor? Any contrary? It's carried. Item number 17, there's a deputation, so we'll hold it. Item number 18 is the Services Board operating budget variance. Motion to approve. Councillor Lee, seconded Councillor Hart, all in favor? Any contrary? That's carried. Item number 19 is the general contractors, the Toronto Police Services Facilities Renovation and Construction Projects. This is the pre-qualified vendors. Motion to approve. Mayor Tory, seconded Councillor Hart. All in favor? Any contrary? Carried. The consent agenda, the item number 20, this is the motion to receive Councillor Carroll's resignation, seconded, sorry, that's Councillor Lee, seconded Mr. Jeffers. Item number 21, there's a deputation, so we'll hold. Item number 22 is the semi-annual report of the Toronto Police Services Board Special Fund, the audited statement, so that's the second half of last year, July to December. A motion to receive. Mayor Tory, seconded Councillor Lee. All in favor? Any contrary? Item number 23 is the annual report, the 2017 activities and expenditures of consultative groups. A motion to receive. Councillor Hart, seconded by Councillor Lee. All in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Item number 24 is the annual report 2017 Toronto Police Services Board consulting fees. So this is the board as opposed to the service. Motion to receive. Mayor Tory, Councillor Hart, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Item number 25 is the annual report, the 2017 Toronto Police Services Board Toronto Police Service consulting expenditures. Motion to receive. Mr. Jeffers, seconded Ms. Mulliner, all in favor? Any contrary? That's carried. Thank you. Item number 26 is a motion to receive as the 2017 public sector salary disclosure in two separate formats. Motion to receive. Mr. Jeffers, seconded Mayor Tory, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. Item number 27, the annual report 2017 Police Cooperative Purchasing Group purchases. Motion to receive. Mayor Tory, Councillor Hart, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. Item number 28, the annual report 2017 sole and single source purchases. Motion to receive. Councillor Lee, seconded Mr. Jeffers, all in favor, and that brings us to a walk-on, which is 29, which is composition of a working group, missing persons. A motion to approve. I think there'll be some questions on that, and there's and we'll move that up on the agenda. Okay, 13 is,
Police officer of the year.
okay, 13 is the request for special funds, the 51st Annual Police Officer of the Year. There is a written submission which is there for you, so if everybody's comfortable with that, a motion to approve. Councillor Lee, seconded Mayor Tory, all in favor. Now, item number 20 9, I think we'll move up, but we'll wait until after the presentations. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I've held those off there. So that brings us to item number 5, which is the anti-racism advisory panel recommendations. And there is a written submission, but we're delighted that Natisha Massaquoi is here to guide us through it. And thank you to you and your colleagues for all the work you've put into this already.
And happy birthday. So I'm very delighted to be here again at the board meeting to give you an update on where we are with the interim steering committee. You do have the report, so I'll just go through some of the highlights. Our steering committee is composed of myself, Upala Chandrasekera, who is the board nominee, and Ms. Asifa Sarang, who's the executive director of Across Boundaries, and representative of the Andrew Loku Coalition. So since this interim steering committee was established through a motion of your December board meeting, we've had extensive meetings to discuss the areas which were referred to us by the board. And we've reviewed each one in detail, and our emphasis has been to ensure that the anti-racism advisory panel be as representative as possible and accessible to all members, including community as well as the board, as well as representatives from the Toronto Police Service. So we've attached a document that details the issues pertaining to our recommendations for the anti-racism advisory panel and the establishment of the panel. We focused on the mandate, terms of reference, the membership structure, the selection of those members, accessibility and location of the meetings, frequency of the meetings, expense that would be incurred through the establishment of the committee, timelines, continuity, and reporting and communications. Just to pull out some of the key things that we think are important to highlight today, the mandate that we are proposing is that the Anti-Racism Advisory Panel advise the Toronto Police Service Board with respect to its role in overseeing and monitoring the response to the implementation of the LOCU recommendations, and we highlight the advisory role of the committee. In terms of the terms of reference, the detailed terms of reference will be established at the inaugural meeting of the panel, but we do want to emphasize that the terms of reference will be developed to establish a monitoring framework for the board to use in assessing the response to and the implementation of each of the inquest recommendations directed to both the Toronto Police Service and the Toronto Police Services Board, including the creation of key benchmarks and performance indicators addressing each recommendation. In terms of membership and structure, I think the key thing to highlight is that the board will be selecting the 2 co-chairs of the committee. One will be the selected board member and one will be a selected community member. The membership that we're proposing is that at least 1 member be of the Toronto Police Services Board, 4 members of the Toronto Police Service to be determined by the Chief of Police, including at least 1 at the rank of Deputy Chief. 6 members from the community with emphasis on individuals with lived experience, including at least 1 representative from the Andrew Loku Coalition, and 2 subject matter experts in the area of anti-Black racism, anti-racism, mental health, and addiction. In summary, we want to emphasize the timelines that this committee that the interim committee is recommending that the panel be established to develop the framework for monitoring the LOCU inquest recommendations. So the timeline that we're establishing is that by the July meeting, we should be presenting the board with a selection of committee members. We've also attached a recruitment process and selection process that we would like to undertake, and that by September we would be holding the first meeting. And it's anticipated that our initial mandate will be wrapped up and concluded by December 31st, 2019. If at the conclusion of this period, the board with input from the panel determines that the work of the Anti-Racism Advisory Panel shall continue, at that time the mandate, scope, and membership of the panel will be reassessed by the board at that time. So that is what we're proposing. We are recommending 4 key things: that the board approve the elements of the establishment of the Anti-Racism Advisory Panel, including the terms of reference that I've detailed as described in the attached document. 2, that the board approve the panel member recruitment process and application document that we've attached, and that the board approve that the members of the interim steering committee continue as members of the panel until December 31st, at which time you'll reassess the mandate and purpose of the committee. And 4, that the interim steering committee conduct the recruitment process and provide a report to the board at its July 19th meeting, recommending a slate of candidates for membership for review and approval of the board. I do also want to emphasize that we've established or proposed the committee members, but we also understand that our board chair, Andy Pringle, does sit on all of the committees of the board, so we also welcome his support and participation in the work that we're doing.
Thank you, colleagues. Questions? If not, again, thank you very much, and Upla, thank you for all the work that you've done and put into it. This is a very important committee. We only have one other standing committee, and that's on mental health, which is one of our biggest challenges. So I look forward to the input and the engagement. So thank you again. With that, colleagues, Councillor Lee, question? No. Okay. With that, then, Councillor Lee, you're in your final meeting. You're wanting to get on as many times. So I take it that you are putting forward the motion to approve. Councillor Lee, seconded. Ms. Sandra Casera. All in favor? Any contrary? Again, Patricia, thank you so much for all the time and effort. Appreciate it. Colleagues, item number 6 is a presentation on the Naloxone program. Chief Saunders, is there a presentation on the implementation of the Naloxone?
Is Superintendent Baptiste here? Yes, please.
Yep.
Thank you.
This is, yeah, we're working. Chair, Chief, members of the board, thank you again for having us. As we've been moving ahead with a number of items that require action on our part so that we can implement a naloxone program in an effective way that is going to have proper oversight and reporting mechanisms as has been requested by the board. So, yeah, I've got it. Thanks. Before I go on, I just want to acknowledge Inspector Paul McIntyre and Detective Constable McNamara, who have been doing an awful lot of the heavy lifting in pulling this together for us. We're recognizing some challenges in regards to first aid training. When we looked at our target audience, as we have discussed at previous board meetings, there's 963 police officers who are going to be issued with this. Of that, 56% of those officers are currently certified in basic first aid, as is a requirement before they can be naloxone trained. 44% of the officers in the target audience are currently expired or will expire in 2018 and require updated training. So we have been working diligently to take that on. The staff at the Toronto Police College have created additional capacity to put more officers through that training. They've expanded class sizes. They've created additional first aid training sessions. They've obtained an additional instructor to elevate this in the coming couple of months. And they're scheduling larger training groups on site at the target divisions, so that instead of transporting officers all the way to the college, we're doing training on site at the targeted divisions. Some of the challenges we're seeing, though, in making that happen is getting the officers available to attend the training. And some of that is, of course, the concern for frontline service delivery, so that we have our minimum staffing levels that are prescribed in each division. Also court attendance requirements, mandatory training, officers that have to go for their annual in-service training, et cetera, annual leave, time off. That being said, we are moving ahead. We anticipate being in full compliance with the basic first aid in time for the rollout of this program, which we're targeting right now for no later than the end of June. With respect to the procurement logistics surrounding the implementation, we are working on a memorandum of understanding between the Toronto Police Service and Toronto Public Health. That MOU, we have a draft currently. It is going through an approval process. That is necessary for the obtaining of the drug and the medical oversight required. We've also had to create a reporting template within Versadex. That is something that has been done through our professional standards branch, so that we would be able to access the numbers in terms of the number of times that naloxone has been administered, so that we can report quarterly to you as you've directed. That template, it sounds simple, it's being tested to make sure it works properly in the Versadex environment. Medical Advisory Services will place the initial order for 1,000 naloxone kits. Toronto Public Health needs about a 2-week lead time to get our hands on that quantity of the drug, and we have to wait until the last possible moment to order it. The reason being that Toronto Public Health has already taken delivery of some of these kits with 2019 expiry dates. So if we're going to maximize on the 2-year shelf life, we want to push it out as late as possible. Our records management services couriers will pick up the naloxone kits from Toronto Public Health, and will be distributing those through the service to all the various units requiring them. Extra kits are going to be stored at Medical Advisory Services under the supervision of medical staff, ensuring that they're properly stored. There are some challenges with regards to governance and the Special Investigations Unit. We have created a draft of a new procedure, 0815 naloxone, which will govern how the naloxone program runs within the Toronto Police Service, and when and how that will be issued. We have a draft ready for approval through the chain of command. And as you're aware, under the Safer Ontario Act, Bill 175, the issue of police officers being exempt from SIU oversight, or that police services would be exempt from having to notify the SIU, has been addressed in regards to emergent medical instances, things like using a defibrillator, performing CPR, or administering a drug like naloxone. So this bill, of course, has been passed. We're awaiting the creation of regulations. That's not anticipated until much later this year, possibly next. So at this point, we are moving ahead, and we will have to notify the Provincial Special Investigations Unit every time we administer the drug naloxone and the injury threshold is met, which would be, for all of us in here, admission to hospital or death. Medical delegation, Dr. Windsor, through Medical Advisory Services, is reviewing the naloxone e-learning training course through the Canadian Police Knowledge Network. As I've told you, this is approximately a 1-hour course. A member has to have basic first aid certification, and then it is a 1-hour online training program with a practical where they would see test kits. For this medical delegation to be approved under the Regulated Health Professionals Act, we require the procedure to be completed and approved, the tracking report to be completed and working, and the memorandum of understanding with Toronto Public Health to be completed, approved, and in place prior to the medical oversight, the final medical oversight being approved through Dr. Windsor. We've developed a communication strategy. I say we, it has not me. It was Acting Superintendent Chris Kirkpatrick and Sandra Buckler from the Chief's Office have worked diligently on an internal and external communication strategy that is going to be utilized to, as we roll this out, to ensure that effective messaging is going out across internally within the Toronto Police Service and across the community. And we anticipate, as I said, a field deployment to all the members that we have previously indicated to you to commence through the end of June 2018. Barring any questions, that concludes my presentation.
Colleagues, questions? Ms. Shannon-Casera?
Thank you. Not a question, more a comment. Just want to say thank you. I think from where we started this conversation in the fall, you've come a long way in a short time, and I really want to thank you for that and all the care that you've taken into doing this. This is something very new for the service, so I really appreciate that. My only request is that we get regular updates from you on how it's going, because this is an ongoing crisis, as you know. So it would be great to hear from you when you would expect to come back to the board with a similar update, and especially after you've started the process, how it's going and how it's being administered.
I would suggest that the next time we would come to the board, if possible, I would suggest potentially July, post-rollout, and then quarterly reporting thereafter.
Mayor Tory has some question or comment.
Questions. First of all, just regarding the SIU, you've been doing, I think as I understood from the beginning of the report, quite a bit of the first aid training, and I assume, because it said in the report, you cover off SIU and related matters as part of that training, am I right?
I'm sorry, sir, I didn't understand your question.
When you're doing the training,
yes.
I think it implied in the report that training includes not just first aid, but it also includes educating the members who will carry the naloxone on the SIU aspects of this. Is that correct?
That's part of the internal communication strategy, and that is there is a whole element to ensuring that we're answering officers' questions, we're telling them how that's going to work. There's a new procedure, as I said, that's been drafted that directs police officers. And with any new procedure as it rolls out, there's an educational component where officers are brought up to speed by their supervisors on day-to-day training rollouts, etc. So yes, there is a training.
So none of that has actually happened, because my question was really, the core question I wanted to ask was whether there's been any concern expressed to the point where it might affect the actual deployment of this in circumstances where it needs to be deployed, as it were, because of concern that officers have about the SIU and the present requirement that would necessitate a referral to the SIU in the circumstances you described. And I just wanted to see if there's any anxiety, because I certainly don't think that requirement is helpful at all, and I realize it's going to hopefully be resolved by the regulation. And I have another question on that in a moment. But is there a concern that has been picked up on that as yet, or is it too early to tell?
Fair question, Mayor. And there is a concern, but I will make the bold assumption that the officers that are out there have huge concerns for loss of life and understand that this is primarily harm reduction, and that's what they're going to do. So I don't think they're going to allow administrative process bypass what the greater good is of that particular situation as it comes to the discussion involving the SIU and the present stance that they have taken, which is according to the law and their interpretation of it. There are ongoing discussions right now with OACP and with the Ministry of the Attorney General's office, and the conversations are fairly open, and there's potential to maybe have some alterations and considerations of the fact that when officers arrive on scene and their sole purpose in that scenario is to try to save a life, that there is some strong consideration to make the alterations. And so the training can't be firm yet because the law is still, as you can see, a bit of a moving target, and we've got the election coming up as well too. So there are a lot of moving parts to it, but that will get nailed down as we proceed, and it's something that we're all very alive to, and we're all watching and having ongoing discussions.
So thank you, Chief. Because I obviously would not want there to be like 1 millisecond of hesitation on the part of any officer because they thought of the administrative process, and I think you've said, and I think correctly, that there wouldn't be. My second question was just about the timing we heard, which I believe set up there and in the report that you're going to start to sort of roll this out and have the education in June, and yet you also said very honestly that you didn't expect these regulations to come until January. And my question was going to be whether it would be helpful, or quite frankly, best we stay out of it, if the board or myself, in my own case as mayor, I would certainly be prepared to communicate with the Ontario government and just say, look, this actually is a matter of life and death, or potentially could be, and that while I realize regulation making is not as simple as people think, that it would be helpful to the community and to the police officers involved if that regulation was done long before the beginning of, because the beginning of next year can become the middle of next year, can become the end of next year, and then you're more likely to run into a situation where this is somehow going to impact on somebody trying to save a life.
Well, first off, thank you and the board for your consideration in assisting with this particular discussion. I can say that the conversations are fairly active and fairly cooperative at this point in time. We've moved in the right direction at a very the pace has picked up, which I think is a positive sign of everyone's understanding of what needs to be done. So I think right now it's looking relatively healthy. But if we hit that stumbling block, we'll definitely reach out to the board and see if there is a collective approach that can be taken.
That was a very polite way the chief said stay out of it, which is fine. I accept that, because if it's moving along fine, that's fine with me. The other question I had was on a more practical matter of the, I've been told when I was being educated on this previously that there are a lot of issues with regard to the storage and carriage of naloxone in terms of the temperature it's kept at and all this kind of thing. And one of the things that was said, I think even when we discussed it here at the board, was that when you're carrying it as part of your, your overall gear, that could be difficult to maintain those conditions. And have we in some way or other addressed all of that, so that as you make reference to the expiry date, you also wouldn't want to see that expiry date end up in a situation where even if it was quite far out, it was hastened by the fact it was carried in a way that was too hot, or any of those kinds of things? And have we addressed those issues?
Yes, we have, sir. One of the ways that this has been dealt with is the fact that instead of issuing it as daily issued equipment, so that this drug kit would then go from one officer to another officer to another officer, where there's no way to track it. Officers have to be taught what the extremes are, and if they believe that they have carried this in a way, or have left it by chance in their duty bag in a car and it was minus 25 overnight, if they've done something like that, that responsibility has to go on them, the onus on them personally, so that they know to go and get this exchanged. And there will be a suitable quantity of the drug in each of the facilities where this is going to be issued, that an officer can come in, they'll fill out a form, they get a new issuance of the drug, but just in case it has gone outside of that parameter for an extended period of time where the drug might deteriorate.
Thank you.
Colleagues, any other questions? If not, Scott, thank you for
Sir.
your presentation. Ms. Shelley, did you have a motion you want to put forward? Otherwise, we're just going to receive the presentation.
Just what was discussed, that there's the chief provide the board with an update on the implementation of the program at the July meeting, with quarterly updates subsequently.
Perfect. Chief Saunders?
Would it be possible, or the board's appetite, to create a timeline in which we can convert that from quarterly to semi-annually at some point in time, maybe after a 2-year review? Unless, of course, there are some issues and concerns that need to be addressed, then obviously keep it at the quarterly status.
Right, so you're suggesting quarterly for the next year, and then
To be
semi-annual?
reviewed?
18 months to be safe.
Okay. So we'll, the motion of the chief provide the board with an update on the implementation of the Toronto Police Service Naloxone program at the July meeting, with quarterly updates for the next 18 months. And semi-annually thereafter. So that's the motion put forward by Ms. Shelley. Is there a seconder for that? Ms. Mulliner, any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried. And with that, I'm taking we receive the presentation of Superintendent Baptist and all the work that's done. Scott, thank you very much. That takes us to item number 7, and that is a presentation by Deputy Chief Raymer on the 2017 Annual Hate Crime Statistical Report.
Yes, and if I could have Detective Sergeant Matthews, Detective Purchase, and Detective Constable Beasley come up, please, for the presentation piece.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair, Chief, for the opportunity to present the hate crime report.
I'm Detective Sergeant Matthews, and with me is Acting Detective Sergeant Purchase and Detective Constable Bisla of the Intelligence Services. I'm going to cover kind of an overview of our hate crime procedures and the way that we conduct business. Detective Sergeant Purchase will discuss the report in more detail, and Detective Constable Bisla will discuss our training. The Toronto Police Service recognizes that the impact of crime motivated by hate or bias is far-reaching, extending beyond physical and emotional trauma suffered by the victim and encompassing other members of the targeted group. Hate crimes can lead to the isolation and vulnerability of the victim group and can cause severe stress for all members of the community. If unchecked, these crimes can result in escalating social tensions between different groups and communities that they destroy. An appropriate police response to hate crime goes beyond law enforcement and must convey a strong message for our respect and for commitment to a diverse society. The Toronto Police Service mandate around hate crime was established in 1993. The mandate includes reviewing all suspected hate crime occurrences to ensure consistent identification, classification, and to ensure a thorough investigation, providing investigative assistance and expertise to investigations and prosecutions of hate crime, investigate and liaise with the Ministry of the Attorney General in relation to hate crime propaganda cases, maintain an information base of hate crime occurrences, excuse me, assist in developing public education programs, and act as a central focus for the dissemination of information. Each division as well has hate crime coordinators, and I'll turn it over to Detective Sergeant Purchase.
Good afternoon. Here tonight represent two of several members of the section in the hate crime unit, and of the mandate which Detective Sergeant Matthews touched on. One of the responsibilities that we have each year is to compile, gather, and maintain the statistics for hate crimes in the City of Toronto and prepare a report for the Chief and the Board. So the 2017 annual hate crime report is before you, and I'll touch on a few of the main points. So the statistical report is an annual report that compiles statistics on criminal offenses that are committed against persons and property, in which the crimes appear to be motivated by the victim's race, national or ethnic origin, language, color, religion, sex, age, mental or physical disability, sexual orientation, or any other similar factor. In 2017, we noticed an increase of the total number of hate crimes occurrences reported to the Toronto Police Service. The increase is from 145 incidents or reports in 2016 up to 186 incidents, and that represents an increase of about 28%. Over the past 10 years, the average number of reports of hate crimes in the city are 147. Further notes regarding the increase is speaking with our colleagues, not only in the GTA, but across Ontario and other parts of Canada, not to speak to specific statistics in those jurisdictions, but there is a trend of increase of reporting of hate crimes, not only in the GTA, Ontario, and Canada, and also in Canada. So it is a trend across the country. We didn't go into the states, the laws are different, but here across the country, there is a noticeable trend of an increase.
So is it a trend of increase in reportings or crimes?
Of reporting of crimes, and that increase is consistent. There isn't one identifiable area that shows a notable increase. It's a general increase of reports across the different groups. Now, I'd like to bring the Chief's attention and the Board's attention to a typographical error that I made in the report, where in the report, I don't have the page number in front of me, but the report cited 19 persons arrested in 2016, when in fact it was 12 persons arrested in 2016. So the quote was in comparison to the arrest last year to this year. This year, there were 23 people arrested in relation to hate crimes, and again, that was from 12 reports or arrests in 2016 to 23 reports in 2017. So as I touched on,
there has been a fluctuation in the reported hate crimes, and from there can be multiple factors that affect that fluctuation, and a number of those factors include the international events that we all are aware of that happen across North America, the media attention and increased awareness of hate crimes, the community educational programs, as well as ongoing hate crime training for officers, in which my colleague Kieran will touch on.
Hi, good afternoon. The report is important because it provides the police and the community information as to what types of crimes are being committed and who the targeted victim groups are. We recognize that hate crimes can inflict a lot of pain, which crosses all community borders, and that underreporting continues to remain one of the biggest challenges. There's a number of reasons why people don't come forward. We've highlighted some of those in the annual hate crime report, but just to review, it's fear of retaliation. Victims may not realize or recognize that they have been a victim of hate because of embarrassment and sometimes uncertainty of the criminal justice response. Education is one of the most important components of our mandate, and the hate crime report provides an overview of the training and education initiatives that were undertaken by our unit. Just to highlight, in May 2017, the Toronto Police Service Hate Crimes Unit partnered with HICIT. HICIT is the Hate Crime and Extremism Investigative Team. It's a provincially funded team. Toronto Police is one of the 15 police services that is part of HICIT. We provided training to not only Toronto police officers, but officers from other services, Ministry of the Community Safety and Correctional Services, as well as HICIT members. The representatives from the Ministry of the Attorney General's office and some of our community partners were invited. The purpose of the training was to provide information on not just recognizing and understanding hate crimes, but also in how to investigate and understanding some of the legislation surrounding hate crimes and hate speech. On several occasions, members from our unit provided education and training on hate crimes at the Toronto Police College during various courses that were offered. We also meet with our hate crime coordinators. We have 17 hate crime coordinators throughout the service, and we meet with them annually to discuss some of the challenges and issues in training each year. There's also another number of presentations that we delivered. Again, those are highlighted in the annual report. In 2018, we continue to fulfill our mandate. Recently, in March, the Toronto Police Service Hate Crimes Unit was part of the Attorney General's Hate Crime Training Conference that was held here in Toronto. And we continue to do training and provide education alongside our community partners and deliver these presentations to members of the service, both internally and externally.
Thank you. That concludes the overview. So, colleagues, questions? Councillor Hart.
So I noticed in your report on page 27 that in 2017 you did a lot of outreach to community groups and diverse communities, organizations. Can you tell me what you learned out of that? And if your learnings out of that process has changed your approach?
One of the things we hear from members of the community is that they feel underreporting is still an issue. The community doesn't often recognize when something is a hate crime, when there is a hate crime, whether they should be covering it up or removing it, and with respect to mischief that's committed on a building that may be anti-whatever specific group. So we listen to the needs of those community groups, and we continue to provide information on reporting, identifying, and also the importance of not victimizing other groups. So when there is graffiti, yes, we would like it covered up. We do want to report it, have it reported so we can address those issues and provide the appropriate police response.
Mayor Tory?
First of all, I want to thank you for I know it's an annual report and it's not new, but I think that sort of identification of this and investigation of it and the profiling of it and the fighting of it is really fundamental to, to being successful in as diverse a city as we are. And I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. You mentioned in the report on education that you'd gone to campuses, and I find it interesting, just as I watch the rest of the news, that campuses seem to be a place where, unusually to me, there's more tension. And I didn't know whether any of these actual acts, the 186 or that number, had actually happened on campus, and whether when you went to campuses to carry out the education that you find that it's a place where, you know, that there is more of this tension that makes it a more likely breeding ground for this kind of thing, or whether that's not any more so than any other place you might go when but you mentioned that you went to universities and colleges as part of your educational tour.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we did. We went to the main campuses across the city. One of the reasons why we did this year is in the 2016 report, we recognized a trend of that increased reporting or instance in being reported to the police on those campuses. So we went to, our first stop was to the security personnel of the campuses to ensure that they were aware of proper reporting and evidence collection and reporting it to us as a police service. And both Kieran and I went to several sessions with faculty plus students, and we did find there was tension's not the right word in the sense that we found that there was a tension, I suppose is the right word, between groups on campus, and that was manifesting in mostly graffiti being reported to the police, and different student groups were reporting those incidents from the schools.
I couldn't think of a better word than tension.
And neither could I. Apologize.
I noticed here, and it's just a question as to how you sort of apply your efforts. If you add it up, I mean, 25% of the population, I know there's some overlap in some of these groups, account for like almost 75% of the hate crime instances. So you have the Muslim population, 8% of the population, 18% of the complaints, the black population, 9% of the population versus 18% of the complaints, and the Jewish community, 3.8% of the population versus 28% of the complaints, and then it's harder to tell on the sexual orientation, but they represent 8.6% of the instances of hate crimes. And I just wondered, maybe you could just briefly talk about the educational efforts and how you might focus in, or do you focus in on those communities that seem to represent the vast preponderance, focus in on them in the sense of trying to help people understand better what represents hate speech in the context of graffiti and things like that go on. Do you work with those communities at all? I realize they are the victims of this as opposed to the perpetrators, but I just wondered, in light of the fact that it's so concentrated that way, as your statistics show, that what you do to take account of the fact that that's the biggest part of the problem, as it were, in terms of people committing acts of hate crime against those people in those communities.
We have spoken to specific representatives of communities or representatives from specific communities, but we also do call upon our community partnerships and engagement unit quite a bit, who have already made those inroads in those communities for many aspects of policing, and we rely on those officers to pass any messaging on as far as hate crime. We have gone at their request to speak specifically hate crime at town halls representing religious organizations. But our role at Intel isn't primarily outreach. We support the services more organized outreach through CPEU.
I just have two more quick ones, Mr. Chair. First, and this is always a question you sort of regret answering, it's like asking somebody, do you think you're paid enough to do your job? But do you have the resources that you need? I mean, because I noticed the educational, assignment that you carry out is quite extensive. And do you have the resources that you need in order to sort of go as many places as you? I realize there's never enough places you could go to educate people on this, but to do an adequate job of.
I don't want to put the chief on the spot, sir.
Oh, I see.
We have found we have found a significant increase of work this year with the increased awareness publicly through the media, online. This is in the forefront of a lot of people's minds. We are getting requests to go to community groups. Kieran and I went to one yesterday. We have another one organized for tomorrow. There is an increased demand in the current climate, so to speak. We're managing. Investigations are still our priority, but we're finding that peripheral support is drawing more and more time on us.
And my last question, Mr. Chair, was about investigations. If I understood the numbers correctly, I think is it 19 over 186? We have 19 arrests and over 186 episodes, is that right?
23
20.
persons arrested.
So say it's a little more than 10%. And I don't ask the question in any critical way, but rather that's a function, I presume, of the fact that it's very difficult, even with all the cameras that are out there now and so on, to find somebody who sprayed graffiti on a garage or did something like that.
Mr. Mayor, you touched on it there. The majority of the reports we get, or over 50%, are graffiti. They're damage to property, whether it be scrawlings on the wall or spray paintings. Those are typically done at night in darkness. There aren't witnesses, so those are extremely difficult offenses to detect the perpetrator. With that as having the majority of the occurrences as a starting point, the arrests stem from the other occurrences that fall within the other categories.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Jeffers?
Yes, sir. Thanks very much for that report as well. I have a couple of questions, a comment and a question. One of the major rationale, I should say, for the Transformational Task Force report was trying to improve trust between communities and the police. And has it been your experience that some groups that have historically experienced hate crime, like LGBTQ community, black community, people from Islamic community, and so forth, did you get a sense that, because there is a degree of cynicism and so forth, right? That's why we are trying to improve these relations. But coming forward to report hate crimes, do you get a sense that some groups thinks it's a futile effort, that they have not been, they have not got the kind of outcomes that they would like to see, so they stop, they handle it themselves in their own way. Some groups do that and not come to the police to report it. Do you get any sense of that?
Sure. Speaking with some of our community partners and advocacy groups, we do sometimes hear that individuals will contact their...
Closer to the mic, please.
Sure. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking to our community partners, we do hear that sometimes individuals are afraid to contact police, so they'll go to their advocacy groups and report the incident. When we're speaking with those advocacy groups, we're encouraging them to have individuals still come forward. We still want to know what's happening in our city. We want those reports filed, so we relay the importance of reporting. But clearly, it's difficult to tell, who's reporting and who's not reporting, because we're capturing those who are coming forward. But my understanding is that advocacy groups and various community groups do also keep stats of offenses that are being committed, in which they're reporting to their community groups, but not perhaps reporting to police. So yes, that does happen, but we continue to encourage the community to file reports with police.
Yes, well, perhaps a consideration of what needs to be also considered, I think, is the fact that groups that your partners in the community tend to be groups that are fairly well organized, I would imagine, and so on. Because some of the experiences that we've had certainly in the consultations and my own experiences in speaking with groups, is that there's not only a fear, but there's this sort of futility that is experienced in not seeing outcomes. And so I'm asking if there are ways in which, and I know you're perhaps under-resourced, as you said, in terms of trying to get the message out there, but it is really important that groups that are not well organized or resourced, that we find a way of reaching those groups. Because when you look at partnerships, such as the Jewish community, the Islamic community, etc., some groups are more organized than others, right? And so there's a sense that, I can come, there's an organization I can come to, and so on and so forth. I think some of the groups that historically, as I mentioned, have been victims of hate and hate crimes should perhaps have a plan that would encourage even more those groups to respond and react to what you're doing.
I agree, and I'm hoping that the report that we put forward encourages individuals to come forward to see that there are other individuals that perhaps are being targeted for similar types of offenses, and hopefully that will encourage other community groups to come forward. As Detective Scott Purchase mentioned, we do work with other units within the service, the Community Partnership and Engagement Unit. We also work alongside corporate communications in getting the message out of hate crimes, that the Toronto Police Service does take these reports quite seriously. And we also work with divisions and divisional hate crime coordinators and assisting them in creating initiatives within their own divisions to hopefully reach out to those community groups.
Yeah,
So
and the last point I'd make, though, is that hate crimes are viewed as you've mentioned, 50% of the hate crimes is graffiti.
right.
Okay, and so there's a lot more to hate crimes than graffiti, as we know. So that's to me, that's an indication of sort that there's a view there that hate crimes really are recognized by graffiti, and that's obviously not the main. It may not even be the primary hate crime. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I think we need to really have some sort of a comprehensive look at that. As a,
Thank you, Mr. Jeffers. Chief Saunders?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to get the numbers right, it was 51% last year that were most of the offenses were mischief-related. 2017 was 65%, and 31% are, I believe, assaults in nature. But there are a lot of moving parts. I'm certainly not going to put the onus on this unit to take care of everything. And so as we deal with Deputy Ewan's command, with that community-centric piece and having that lens, that will hopefully develop the relationship piece to help enhance people, whether it's the education piece, which I believe is one of the points articulated. Some people just don't know that it is necessarily a hate crime, or the stigma piece, but developing a relationship and then building upon that when it deals with all of the aspects of the criminal entities within the communities will be the points that will bring the benefits.
Colleagues, any other questions? If not, Sergeant Matthews and both of you, Sergeant Purchase and Constable Bisla, thank you, first of all, for the presentation, but thank you more importantly, as the Mayor said, for all the work that you're doing. It's important and we really appreciate it. It was certainly a very comprehensive report, and I think you've presented and addressed it well, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Colleagues, if there are no other questions, may I have a motion to approve the report and presentation? Ms. Santa Casera, seconded. Ms. Mulliner, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried unanimously. Again, thank you all very much, and
Thank you.
we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That takes us to item number 8, which is the request for the increase in establishment of communications operators and operations supervisors at the communications services. Deputy Chief Coxon, I think, is going to present this. This is an extremely complex and important report, and I think, Deputy Chief, you might just talk about the history a little bit of how long we've been at the present number we've been at, and et cetera. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to come and present to you today and to give you some highlights from the review. I wanted to start off by just acknowledging Superintendent Hugh Ferguson, who's here today, Staff Sergeant Chuck Conkle, who's not able to be here today, and as well the Manager of Communications Services, Dion Evelyn, who are here today and who were so pivotal for this review, and to thank everyone who works at Communications Services, because that grassroots discussion about challenges and opportunities came from people who work in the unit itself. So I'm tremendously grateful for their contribution. All right, so we are the busiest police communications center in Canada, the 5th busiest in North America, and we do triage for police, fire, and ambulance. So when you call 911 to the Toronto Police Service, you get the question of, do you need police, fire, or ambulance? The other thing that's important to know is, at that point in time, the call taker remains on the phone with you through the point where you're sent over to the other agency, and then they stay on the line with you through the point where you're giving information to that other agency. So when you think of call centers that exist in other places, it may not be this model. And that's very important because it means that our call takers are spending a lot of time on the phone with people, even when the call is transferred to another agency. There we go. So how did we get here? And this is the point you were asking about, Chair. The staffing level has remained the same for more than 25 years. And I say that with respect specifically to communications officers or operators, which also include call takers. So we found this old photo from 1989 of one of our dispatchers at that time. And at this point in time, our establishment for communications operators is 231. In 25 years ago, it was at 239. So we've actually gone down slightly, and demands have increased. So we really need to look at the fact that the time we stay on the calls has gone up 33%. So what would have been 100 minutes before would now be 133 minutes. I'm talking about averages overall, and that there's a real need to triage calls, because what we're finding are that non-emergency calls are really growing. Those calls where people are looking for service and they don't quite know where to go and they're calling us, and it's the same pool of call takers that are responding to those as are responding to 911 calls. And so we've also found that a significant number of personnel are not available to be doing the duties that they need to do, and that's just because of operational changes over time. So I've just put up a general list here. Please note that this is an average. It may look different on one day versus another. For example, it could be 47 today, it could be 55 tomorrow, but generally speaking, on average, there's 23.3% of the total unit establishment that's actually not available to do the duties of call taking and dispatching that are actually built into the establishment that we have. So you combine that with the 33% increase of time that people spend on a call, and you're looking at a significant gap, even though we've remained at our unit establishment over the last number of years. So what we've asked for today is to increase the unit establishment from 231 to 281 communication operators. So that's an increase of 50. And the reason that I showed you what we call detractors, or the numbers of people who are not available on the floor, as well as explained the increase in the call time, is to show you why that number needs to go up as much as it does. The breakdown with respect to classes and hires is in the business case that you have in front of you. We've also asked that the shift schedule, which we've been piloting for 3 years, and I thank the board because you've been heavily involved in this for the past 3 years, including a review of that pilot, which is a combined shift of 12 hours and 8 hours. So some people work an 8-hour shift, some people work a 12-hour shift. We would like that to become a permanent schedule for the communications operators. They've been working on this pilot for 3 years, and one of the stresses that they've had is that they didn't know whether it would become their permanent shift or not, because it was never finally approved. And so we would like it to get approved, and in fact, the numbers that we've built in with respect to this ask is contingent upon that shift schedule being approved. The third thing is not actually an ask, but we just wanted to turn your mind to it, and that is that we are continuing to work with Labor Relations and the Association for a part-time pool. There is a part-time pool that is built into the collective agreement, but that allows us to hire for gapping, which means that because it takes a year to train a communications operator, that we need that time frame as people retire and leave. We need that time frame to be up a little bit, so that way our numbers can be higher than the establishment to fill that gap. We want that gap to go up a little bit further, and then to use those people as what we call surge capacity. So on weekends, as we saw last summer, some weekends are very busy. We'd like to bring in more people to come back and work during time frames where we've had challenges throughout the city. For example, the ice storm, we'd like to bring in extra people who are truly part-time. They might be retired and they might just come back and work a few hours a week, but we would like to have them as that increased capacity during the time frames when we need it most. So July 3rd is a pivotal day for us. We have hired, as you know, 40 communications operators. We hired 20 in October, and we hired 20 in the new year, in January. It does take a year to train people, but our mind has always been on what will happen this summer, because summer we have increased demand for 911 across the city. So as of July 3rd, we will officially have 14.5 more call takers on the floor in a 24-hour period, and that includes 26 more people who are available for callbacks. That is significant because callbacks is a part of the establishment process, so it actually means that we have more people on the floor every day. So we are looking at classes of 20 each, and this is in the report itself. We would look at hiring this year in July, October, December, and March. These hires are strategic, both in terms of numbers. We can't hire more than 20 at a time because of the simulation system that we have. In addition, it is very difficult to hire during certain points in time because we have to take people off the floor to train the new people coming in. So we actually reduce our capacity a little bit during times that we're training. So it's very, very important that these are strategically placed during timeframes where we aren't as busy so that we can handle the training. You'll notice as well, before I move on, that that actually adds up to 120 people if you include the 40 that we hired in the last few months, as well as the 80 that we're talking about. There's two factors in play with that. One, only 70 to 80% of people who are hired actually pass the training, so our success rate is not as high. It's just a very, very difficult job, so we do have a number of people who just don't make it through. And in addition to that, we have a number of people who are set to retire, and so we actually believe that those numbers are needed just to get us to the 50 extra that we're asking for. I just wanted to point out that while I'm talking about numbers and increase in establishment, the review looked at so many more things than that. And we looked at things like morale and the wellness of our members. Very important. It's an extremely stressful environment. So we've done some things already, like put a wellness room in so people can go and relax and decompress after a very difficult call. In addition, we've reconfigured to the district model. And I'll give an example of that. 51 Division was the busiest desk that was up there, and it was combined with another unit. So we've separated those desks again to reduce the stress level that people are facing. In addition to that, we have a number of other initiatives I've just put up there that are coming that we're quite excited about. And these are all based on feedback from members and what they would like to see in their work environment. So other things that are coming are the need to reduce demand through public education. This is going to be something we're going to be working on for a long time, helping people to understand when they should be calling 911, because we want people to call 911 when they need to call 911. When it is an emergency, we want you to call. In fact, the response times to those calls have not changed at all during any of this time frame that we've looked at these numbers. So we're really good at answering those high priority calls for service. But the calls for service that are actually non-emergency, where we don't need to send a police car right away. Maybe we don't need to send a police car at all. This is where we need to educate the public on what number they should be calling and other things that they can do, such as reporting online, which will help to reduce our demand. In addition to that, we're looking at some really interesting technologies that exist in places like the financial sector, as an example, that could potentially be used, have never been used in policing, where we actually think that we could reduce demand even more. So although we've started the review and we've done a number of things, there's lots more that's coming. I just wanted to take a moment. Last week was actually a 911 telecommunicators week, and I know a number of you were involved in that. And so we developed this video, thanks to the Toronto Police Service Video Services Unit. And it's just over a minute long, but I really wanted to showcase it to show the incredible job that our people at Communication Services are doing. And so if you could bear with me, I'd just love to show you this video.
We are the first of the first responders. The front line behind the front line, serving with pride to help keep Toronto safe. We are the voices of the emergency services, the most important people you will never see. We are Toronto's 911 communicators. We answer your calls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, in 140 languages. On an average day, we receive 2,800 911 calls from people in need of help. Each year, we answer more than 1 million calls. From Toronto Police, Toronto Fire, and Toronto Paramedic Services. We are the call takers and dispatchers who get you the help you need when you need help. When it counts, you count on us. We are here for Toronto. We are 911.
Emergency, do you need police, fire, or ambulance? Help is on the way.
And with that, I'd like to take the opportunity to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Deputy Coxon. Mayor Tory, you had some questions, I think?
I do, Mr. Chair, thank you. First of all, Deputy Coxon, that was just an excellent report in the sense that it had very hard numbers in it of things that are going to be done and an action plan, and I want to thank you and the Chief, because I know he asked you to take this on when we started to have some, some obvious problems with it. There's a section in the report dealing with the wellness business, and it talks about the quiet room, and it talks about the ergonomic furniture and so on. And then I saw the number that's in here and up there that you put up that said, I think at any given time there's 16 people who are off for medical purposes, excluding people who are off on maternity or paternity leave. Of the 16, if you could either guess or know, how many are stress related? Because I just was wondering whether even what you've got in there, which is a step forward, is enough, because I sort of get the fact that even one call you might take, let alone a series of them all day, every day, is going to take a toll. I don't think anybody would have any idea until they actually thought about what they're hearing, a lot of the people that are doing this work.
So it's approximately 50% of that number that are stress related.
So do we think, in conjunction, I realize that the stuff you've done with the wellness room and all that is not everything, because we have regular benefits, as it were, that are provided to all members of the police service, but is it enough? Because this job is one where it's just a steady diet of sort of bad news, as it were, for difficult situations. Is it enough? Do you need more help with that?
Are you talking about the services that we offer people?
Yes,
is it
to those
enough?
people in particular, given that they have a very intense day-to-day, everyday exposure to.
Yeah, I actually think it's an area that we just don't think about a lot generally in policing. I mean, certainly the people that are there do think about it and talk about it, and I do think that more can be done, and it is one of the areas that we're continuing to talk about and explore.
Okay, well, you certainly would have my support, and I'm sure the boards, if there were things that you needed to do to help those people, and it's mostly from a humane perspective, as opposed to the fact that you also would like to obviously permit them to come back to work, since they're very highly trained and so forth, but it's mostly about their own individual situations. Second question and final question was about public education. You may have decided that you don't want to do this, but I must say, for me this morning, I'm just one person listening to the radio, and they were playing that unbelievable tape from Peel, where the woman was on who called 911, and they actually played the recording of her saying that the washing machine in the laundromat was broken, and she wondered if somebody could come out and fix it. And the ads we have are much more, the ads, which I think are good in terms of saying, here's when you should call and here's when you shouldn't. But these tapes are very powerful. Certainly that one was me, because you're just shaking your head saying, well, people have to understand they can't use it that way. And I'm sure you could have at least one a week that you could, sort of make known to people and saying, this is how people unfortunately use this incorrectly. And if you, and it uses the news media, frankly, it's free. I mean, so it's one of those things where I know you could overdo it, but I just wondered if you'd sort of thought about that, because I don't think people realize sometimes that they're, using an emergency line to phone about a laundromat washing machine, or, I think they've told me before, you have questions on how to cook a turkey, and people, just unbelievable calls they make to this number.
Yeah, there are different schools of thought out there with respect to the privacy issues around whether or not you can release a 911 tape. I know that's historically why we haven't done it. It has been talked about in the past. What I would say is that there are ways to use that information without necessarily playing the tape. For example, we could do a reenactment, that kind of thing, and I can assure you that there's some really interesting, hilarious / it's very upsetting at the same time examples, as Peel did this morning.
And then final question, I remember the first year I was here, and I read the report that comes out, and it's made public, that said, and I think I'm going from memory, it might have been like 80,000 of those million calls are pocket dial phone calls to 911. And again, it's a hard thing, because I know I'm guilty the odd time of just pocket dialing somebody, because the screen on your phone picks up some pressure. But I don't think people would believe that 80,000 calls for pocket dialing. And is there a way we've found to sort of educate people on that, because it's not really mentioned in the public education program?
Yeah, it definitely needs to be a part. We've done education programs in the past on this specific to pocket dials, and it actually has been effective and reduced it. We certainly need to resurrect that again. I can assure you that's part of what we're looking at for this year for communications. What people won't realize is we actually have someone dedicated to a desk that does nothing 24 hours a day except deal with pocket dials, phoning them back repeatedly, trying to make sure that the person is okay and that it actually isn't a bona fide call where someone has called and hung up, but those phones that we cannot trace and don't know where someone is. So that is someone's full-time job, 24 hours a day. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hart, you had some questions?
Just a few questions. I noticed in the report and in your presentation, you talked about the call time increasing by 33%. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how it's actually benefited the service and how it's benefited the public? What is it you're doing differently that's helping you and helping the public?
So the increase in the call time, a lot of it comes out of the process for the calls. In the past, it simply used to be, okay, what's the issue? Police are on the way, and there was all kinds of response. Now that the call takers are more involved in gathering information, in cases like domestic assault or where there's perhaps mental health or substance issues and that, they'll start to gather questions. They actually start to engage in that de-escalation piece while they're on the phone. And so we have cases where the dispatchers remained on the phone for over an hour. Well, as a matter of fact, the one that won the Communicator of the Year spent an hour on the phone, and it was a result of the efforts of that communications officer that was successfully resolved. And a lot of it's procedural. Sometimes there's decisions that come down from the courts or from inquests that now require us to gather more information. Another one is alarms. They used to just call us and say, hey, we have an alarm and pick an address. Now they have to verify the alarm. They have to tell us what the various triggers are that cause us to go on this alarm, or we don't go. Right, the alarms have to be verified. So when you start to stack all of these things up, a call that used to take, like say 95 to 100 seconds to answer, is now taking us 130 or 140 seconds. Start to stack that up over the course of a day. The call, the length of time, despite the call volumes, is just getting larger. I was going to say worse and worse. Larger and larger by the end of the day. All these seconds add up when you're talking about 1 million calls over the course of a year.
Just to tie back into some of the mayor's questioning on stress, et cetera, your unavailable establishment, if you will, has that number trended up over the last number of years? And that trend up, is it related to stress or is it related to other factors?
Go ahead. Okay, so the actual number that would be off in stress, I think you have to be very careful when you look at that. And within policing in general, and I use the policing in the grand stretch, there's been a greater recognition more recently of the effects of stress and post-traumatic stress disorder. So to say that, in 1989 we only had 2 and this year we had 7 or 9, I think you have to be really careful there, because in a lot of cases in the past it was attributed to other factors as opposed to probably the true measure of what the issue was. And the other thing too is when you look at our detractors, they're not all as a result of medical. Sometimes functions like the deputy mentioned, the hang-up desk. Like 10 or 15 years ago, before these things were invented, we didn't need that desk. Now we can't do without it, because despite the fact that we're calling all these people every day, we do get a couple of calls a day that are actually genuine. Just they got either dropped before they hit the switch or the person inadvertently hung up. So our detractors maybe have grown a little bit, but I don't think without a heck of a lot more, real digging into what the true cause of the illness, if you will, was, it would be appropriate to say yes or no right now.
Ms. Shandikasera.
Thank you. I want to just join the comments shared by the mayor earlier and Councillor Hart saying this is an excellent report. I thought the information in it was really great, and I especially loved the video. I thought it was really great. I too am concerned about the mental health status of the communications officers, so my questions were along the same lines. Are we doing everything we can to ensure they're getting the same level of mental health support as officers? I know you have mental health first aid and R2MR here, so wondering if that support is there. And I have one more other question.
Do you want me to answer that one first?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So in our units where we know that people are particularly vulnerable to high levels of stress for a number of reasons, we have mandatory psychologist visits, and communication services is one of those places. So we are looking to identify when someone is struggling, even maybe before they recognize it, by having these mandatory visits. So we are functioning at a level that is consistent with the most high risk areas of the service. So that recognition is there. You'll never hear me say we're doing enough, because I just think we always need to be looking at what more we can do. And when you ask the question about how many people are off in stress, some people might be disclosing they're off for medical reasons, but it's for something else. We're encouraging people, if you're in crisis, if it's too much, we actually want you to take the time that you need to be well.
Absolutely. And in my experience, oftentimes it shows as a performance issue when really it's a health-related issue. So I think you want to see the numbers actually increase, because that means that people are actually accessing the support that you have. So I think that's great. One that's related is, in the report I noted that the piece around the facility, and perhaps is running its course. So are you actively looking for a new space?
Yes. I mean, as part of the modernization process, we've been looking at all of the facilities. And when I say we, it's actually the service as a whole is looking at what buildings do we have through the city, and which ones make sense for us to stay in, what opportunities emerge as we look at consolidation. So certainly communications is part of that discussion. I can't say that we've necessarily identified, we're in the preliminary stages of where that would be at. There are really unique challenges with moving communication services because of the technology behind it. So that's different than other places, yeah.
Any other questions, colleagues? Councillor Lee?
I just have a process question. When somebody calls 911, they identify it as fire. Does it get sent to dispatch in fire, or does it get to another operator in fire to handle? Or ambulance or medical?
Switched over to fire, and they feel sort of a dual role. It goes to a call-taking person that will then dispatch the fire apparatus. But we would stay on the line during that process, so you don't have to gather the information twice.
Okay.
So it's like, sometimes it's all three agencies listening in to collaboratively gather the information that we need, because the fact that it requires fire and EMS, it may still be a crime call. Maybe as a result of a fall or an assault or a shooting or something. All three agencies are going, and we collaboratively, gather the information through the various call take centers. The fire and EMS don't have anywhere near the number of call takers that we have. Okay. They're more focused on the dispatch end, although they do have some, don't get me wrong.
And are we working on anything with being able to report 911 by the cell phone, by a smartphone?
That's the technology right now. Actually, is very challenging. The only community we deal with that is the hard of hearing community, and they have to actually register first in order to be able to use it. On June of 2023, it will be in place as part of the next generation 911. That on coming board meetings, you're going to hear all about it. Okay. But there's a change coming, mandated by the CRTC, to take it from analog to digital 911, and that's what they're referring to as NG 911, where text and videos and pictures and everything will be able to come to 911. Right now, it's just voice.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, colleagues, if there's no more questions, Superintendent Ferguson, Deputy Coxon, thank you very much. It was a great report, and thank you for the work that you've done. Colleagues, may I have a motion then to approve the presentation? And Councillor Hart, seconded Councillor Lee. All in favor? Any contrary? It's carried. I think I'd like now to jump around on the agenda a bit, if I may, because we have some of the community members here, and I don't want to just wait till the end. This was a walk-on item, so I apologize for that, but it required us to do a bunch of consultations. And this is the composition of the working group of the independent external review with respect to Toronto Police Service's missing person investigations. And I was charged at the board meeting last in March 22nd. The board approved the following motion: that the Toronto Police Services Board Chair report to the April 2018 meeting on the composition of a working group mandated to advise the Toronto Police Services Board with respect to structural and process options for an independent external review or reviews. The working group should consist of not more than 4 members, including a member of the Toronto Police Services Service Board, as well as 3 external members. And in doing so, I consulted a lot with the Mayor's office and worked through them because they have extensive the contacts in this area. Point 2 was that the working group would report to the Toronto Police Services Board at its June 2018 public meeting, and the report should include identifying the best possible form for such an external review or reviews, including one commissioned by the board, for example, and/or one conducted by a third party, such as the Ontario Independent Police Review Director, which is the OIPRD. Discussion with respect to the possible terms of reference include, 1, the Toronto Police Service practices and actions related to past missing person investigations subject to legal restrictions. 2, the Toronto Police Service Board policies, the Toronto Police Service procedures, protocols, training, and organizational structures related to missing persons investigations, which will not include any information or discussion of the MacArthur investigation and possible trial proceedings. 3, the systemic concerns, especially those with relation to bias against people based on protected grounds outlined in the Ontario Human Rights Code. And 4, national and international best practices of missing persons investigations. I read all that, as I say, because this is a walk-on report and you don't have access to it. So having consulted broadly, and I would propose that the board approve the composition of a working group as follows. The working group board members would include Police Services Board member Ken Jeffers, from the community, Shakir Rahim, who is a member of the Alliance for South Asian AIDS Prevention, Sarah Mainville, a partner at Othius Clear Townsend LLP, Monica Forstall, an engagement coordinator at Maggie's, the Toronto Sex Workers Action Project, and as a working group facilitator, which we discussed to facilitate this process, especially given the tight time frame, Breeze Davies from Breeze Davies Law. Now it's that is the group that I would put forward. I've had the opportunity to speak with every member except Monica Forster, who I've talked to in effect through your office, Mr. Mayor. Their biographies of the individuals are attached. The working group, as I say, has been put forward based on consultation with the communities and in my discussions directly with all but one of the members. And the proposed working group members have been chosen with the acknowledgement, as was the guidance, of the importance of the intersectionality of identity, i.e. the number of instances the communities intersect with the various the challenges that we face. So that is, and I again apologize, colleagues, that it's a walk-on report, but that was necessitated by the time frame. So I put that forward for questions that anybody may have or comment. Mayor Tory?
I was just going to comment, Mr. Chair, by saying that because you made reference to the fact that my office was involved, we were trying very hard. This, I think, is a very important first step in addressing something that has been, searing in terms of its impact on the entire community for obvious reasons. But we were obviously, as we discussed the last time, limited in what we could proceed with at this time because of the need to maintain the integrity of police investigations and the trials. But nonetheless, this is something we can proceed to take a look at within appropriate bounds. And I think the single most important message that I heard sitting with more than a dozen of the groups in the LGBTQ community in particular, and also talking with a lot of people as this whole series of events, tragic events unfolded, was the need to make sure that we had a group that was performing this important task that was itself, representative in the sense, or as much as one could do with a group that size, of some of those who've been, whose communities have been directly affected by this, and credible people in terms of our desire, obviously, to have an external, independent review. And I will just say that a lot of these names didn't sort of come from people, deep thinkers in my own office, but rather from them reaching out to the communities and getting names of people who are credible. And I think the biographies indicate that We've done well by that, and I'm very grateful to the people for saying yes. Ms. Brees in particular, I think we came up with the idea of having a facilitator perhaps after the board meeting, simply because somebody has to sort of help to make this work, especially when you're going to be spending quite a bit of time, I think, and I'm not trying to presume upon their work, but all the people that gave input have indicated it's very important to reach out to the community, and it's a very diverse set of communities that we want to reach out to. And I will just say that while I too don't know Ms. Brees, I have read her resume and checked with people who speak about her, and when you look at what she's done with some very complex and controversial inquiries that she has been of counsel to and so forth, I think she's going to be an ideal person to help us in that task. But I mostly just wanted to express my gratitude, because we ask in our public domain people to take on various things like this, and it's really important that we do this and do it well and do it properly and inclusively. And I think the people we have here are first rate, and I think this is a very important step forward to receive this report, and to hopefully the committee, the board here will endorse it.
Any other questions or comments, colleagues? Mayor, I echo your concern. I talked extensively with Ms. Davies, and I was struck by her background understanding, sensitivities, not just the resume. She really gets it. And I think you're right. The idea of a facilitator came later, and I think it is very important because it will help synthesize and get this all the opinions on the table and focused. If there are no further questions, may I have a motion to approve? Ms. Mulliner, seconded Mayor Tory. All in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. And let me echo Mayor Tory's comments about thanking the individuals for putting their names forward for this. It's hugely appreciated. That takes us to item number 9, is it? And that was a hold for UPLA? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
This is just, as everybody knows, this is the item number 9, the annual report 2017 use of CEWs.
Yeah. Thank you again for this report. I thought it was really detailed and very easy to understand. Couple of questions I have. So in it notes that out of 308 incidents, 145 involved subjects with who are under emotional distress or under the influence of drugs and alcohol. And later it notes that out of 308 incidents, 83 resulted in a Mental Health Act apprehension. So my question is, if CEWs were used on 145 people in emotional distress, I would expect to see all 145 of those people taken to the hospital under the Mental Health Act. So I'm just wondering why there's a discrepancy in those numbers.
I'm sorry, can you say that? Sorry, I was
Yeah,
outside.
sure. This is page 6. So at the top, it's discussed that out of 308 incidents, 145 involved people who are under emotional distress or under the influence of drugs and alcohol. And later on that page, it says 83 were apprehended under the Mental Health Act. So I'm wondering why there's a discrepancy in that number, because I would expect to see if CEWs were used on 145 people with mental health issues, that they all be apprehended under the Mental Health Act, because the threshold for CEW use, right, is subject presents threat of bodily harm or death, which is also the threshold for Mental Health Act apprehension. So I guess I'm just wondering why there's a discrepancy in that number. If I could ask the question differently, it seems that not every person with a mental health issue that is subjected to a CEW is apprehended and taken to the hospital.
Yeah, you are correct with that. I certainly won't disagree. The report itself is on taser usages, and the types of usage is that particular section. And we're not using the taser because of a person that lives with mental health issues, because of a circumstance which has created an environment, through whatever narrative in the officer's notes, that presented himself or herself to produce the taser to begin with. So I'm not. You're interested in why were 83 apprehended and the other not apprehended? Is that correct? Okay.
So,
So go ahead.
so my apologies, Chief, if I'm repeating. I was consulting with Julie. So the numbers, the officers are asked to record the subject's condition. So it can be alcohol, drugs, person in crisis, or not applicable. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they actually went to the hospital afterward. So they're asked to look at the condition or the behavior that they're seeing. They make that determination, but it doesn't necessarily meet the threshold for an apprehension under the Mental Health Act.
So that is why I'm trying to get clarification. So the threshold for a Mental Health Act apprehension is similar, right? Subject presents threat to themselves or others, which is the same threshold for deploying a CEW or displaying a CEW. So I guess that's what I'm trying to understand. If you can identify the person was in crisis and you marked them, quote, ADP, why was that person not then apprehended? Because you had the justification to use the CEW, which is the same justification to apprehend.
Yeah. So remember, use is display, or drive, stun, or full deployment. So most of the usage was actually display, and the situation could have been de-escalated to the point where the danger to themselves or others may not present itself, may not result in enough grounds for the officers to apprehend and take to a hospital.
Okay, I think it would be helpful if that piece is clarified, because that's not quite how it reads here. Yeah.
Okay.
My other question is the piece around, I am concerned to read that there was full deployment of CW on youth under 16. So a couple of questions I have about that is, what is the ministry standard? Because my understanding was that it's prohibited to use it on children and youth. So that's the first question. And the second one is, in the injuries section, were any of those injuries, did that involve the youth?
So no injuries. No injuries to youth. Yeah, no injuries to youth. And a couple of the cases, if you want sort of the background to those, were a couple of youths were involved in the commission of a robbery, and at one of the youth had a knife on him, so that's the display of the threat or the weapon. And the other one was where the youth was arrested and was resisting the arrest, and it was required to de-escalate the situation to get the youth under control. So it met the threshold for the youth for the use, which is the officers were presented with a threat of violence and the means for the youth to carry it out.
Okay, so then the ministry guideline is that there's a threshold, so it's not prohibited.
Pardon me?
Okay.
No.
That's what I'm trying to clarify.
No, it's
my
presented with.
understanding was that it was prohibited use on children, but you're saying it's not prohibited.
No, they're presented with a threat, and it's the behavior that's displayed that is the threshold for the use.
Okay, thank you. And the last question is, so in the February meeting, a series of motions were made by the board about reporting. Just wondering if there's timelines on that piece. Just pulling this up. So it's as part of the next applicable quarterly report on CEWs, there's a whole bunch of qualifiers that were put forward. Just wondering if thought had been given to when those reports would be starting.
Yes, so the training's going to be starting mid-May. So the first CEWs will be on the street in mid-May. It's a 2-day course. And we are looking to come back to the board in September as our first quarterly report.
Finished, Dupla? Yeah, great, thanks. Councillor Hart?
Just a couple of quick questions. I notice in some of the divisions, the trends, the numbers are going up a little bit. Some of them are going down a little bit. Does that tell us anything? Like, what does that mean at the end of the day, other than there's more use? Is that telling us anything about the community?
Yeah, there's no significant changes, but I can tell you across the city, since 2015, when we've been reporting the use of the CEW, and particularly on in the area of emotionally disturbed persons in crisis, we're actually seeing an increase in there. So in 2015, when we started, we had 23,000 calls across the city. 2016, that increased to 25,000, and then last year it was over 27,000. So you're seeing a year-over-year increase of 2,000 each year. So since we started reporting an increase of over 4,000 more calls, and you wouldn't have had the benefit, but Inspector Body was here last month saying that we respond to over 540 calls per week. So that's a significant exposure of our officers to these types of calls where they're having to make the decision whether to use or not.
Any other questions, colleagues? If not, may I have a motion then to approve, to receive the report? Ms. Santacasera, seconded. Ms. Mulliner, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. Thank you very much, Barb. That brings us to item number 10, and there is a correction, I'm told, Tony, in this report, and then there's a deposition from Derek. Is there a correction that you wish to make in the report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a minor correction. The reference to the 1.8 million has the words millions after it, and actually would then make the number like 1 trillion. So if we could just remove the millions after that on page 1 and page 2, I think it'll be clearer for everybody.
Thank you. Derek, I don't know if that changes your presentation, but please come on up, and you know the rules. 5 minutes.
I just want to say, by me speaking at this meeting, that shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent expressed or implied. In doing so is fraud. God bless Her Majesty the Queen, and long live Her Majesty the Queen. Brian DeMatos actually wanted to speak on that walk-on missing persons item, maybe at other business at the end. We want to set a good example for the newest member, Councillor Hart here. So when one says, you know the rules, that only counts when the trustees saying it are actually following the rules themselves. I just, want everyone to know. And so, Chair Pringle, guys like me and Mayor Tory already know this, but in trust law, there's something called the 3 certainties. The first one is the certainty of intention. Second one is the certainty of subject matter. And the third one is the certainty of objects. In this case, the objects are the horses of the Toronto Police and the Toronto Police. The subject matter is the capital and income that was left to the objects. And the intention was basically the late Dorothy Keith expressly stating in her will that she wanted this trust to be created with. Just so people know, there's also, you can look it up in the Dictionary of Canadian Law for yourself, a definition for implied trust. So take notice, this is from Villard Construction Limited versus Bird Construction Company, 2018, where the Supreme Court of Canada said, wherever a beneficiary, in this case the horses of the Toronto Police and the Toronto Police, would be unreasonably disadvantaged not to be informed of a trust's existence. The trustee's fiduciary duty includes an obligation to disclose the existence of the trust. So, unlike the government of Ontario, I just want to send a big shout out to the Bank of Nova Scotia Trust Company for fulfilling their duty and their obligation of disclosing the existence of this trust to the Toronto Police. Take notice of Section 59 of the Federal Financial Administration Act, not bound to execute trusts. Her Majesty and a fiscal agent or registrar acting as such are not bound to see to the execution of any express or implied trust to which any securities, think Section 7 of the Constitution, security of the person, are subject. So in this report, it says Ms. Keith passed away in April of 2016, and her will dated September 20th, 2001. She set aside funding from her estate toward a trust fund to be called the Dorothy Keith Mounted Unit Trust Fund, the trust. The Bank of Nova Scotia Trust Company was appointed the estate. I guess one could say the late Dorothy Keith made a deputation and appointed the Bank of Nova Scotia Trust Company to act as the trustee for her in this matter. The service canvassed city legal, but was advised they did not have expertise in wills and estates, which is a little awkward considering the City of Toronto is a trust corporation operating in plain sight. The trust is an opportunity for her to share posthumously her love of police horses and the community for years to come. The approval process for the use of the annual income from the trust based on the objects is at the final discretion of the trustee. The will directs the trustee to invest and keep invested the trust and to hold and apply the capital and income of the trust for the exclusive purpose of the objects of the trust. The objects of the trust include mounted unit objects and police objects. So this is something I just want Chief Saunders to know, because basically horses can't enforce a trust for themselves, obviously. So really it would be Chief Saunders who would be enforcing the trust if he had to. This is from the Donovan Waters Law of Trusts in Canada text. This isn't Dr. Waters himself, but this is Lord Eldon. Lord Eldon's principle remains as valid as ever. The concept of the trust assumes the fundamental feature of a beneficiary who can enforce it. So I think that'll be up to Chief Saunders if it comes to be that, and I'm sure Marianne Wright over there can help him with that. And just as an example of a beneficiary, I have two separate emails here from the Registrar General of Ontario's office, and this is one from the Attorney General's office in which they all refer to me as Derek or Derek Moran, sole living beneficiary. Marco Mendicino's agreed with me that beneficiary is a trust law term. And at this point, I just want to apologize to Georgina if I came off a little harsh yesterday. And I actually do have some submissions to hand in with this presentation. And so I'm going to do that at the end of this. And I don't know if all this has to do, is it time?
Yeah. You got 3 seconds.
Okay, this our favorite website, Dun & Bradstreet. Well, if you punch in Canada, which is listed as a corporation on Security and Exchange Commission's website, it's registered in D.C. You punch in country, United States, the state, D.C. What pops up is something called the In God We Trust, USA Incorporated, 2415 West Sabert Street, Philadelphia, PA 19121. I'm not sure if this is related or not, but.
Thank you, Derek. If you've got something to hand in, we appreciate it. Hand it to Sherry here. Colleagues, any questions of Derek? Okay. If not, then may we have a motion to approve the donation? And yes, absolutely.
Just a very quick question of staff. Are there any plans to honor or recognize this donation, Ms. Keith, in some way?
I'm informed by Superintendent Campbell that in fact we have made a plaque in her honor. She did actually contribute well over her lifetime, both money and her time, her resources and her love, and she deserves that honor.
Okay, colleagues, if there's no more questions, a motion to approve. Councillor Lee, seconded Mayor Tory. All in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. And that brings us to item number 11, which we're holding because we need to approve Joanne, a nominee. So this is a nominee to the Ontario Association of Police Service Boards, and before that, and the Board of Directors, and to the OAPSB Spring Conference. Was it Councillor Carroll was our representative before? So we have volunteers. Councillor Lee, you don't count. A recommendation, Joanne? I mean, this is dealing with, I guess, the new Safer Ontario Act, which is the new Police Service Board Act, but how much time is involved?
Well, it's a position on the Board of Directors of the Ontario Association of Police Services
Right.
Board, so it would deal with everything they do, including their own staff, their own budget, their advocacy initiatives. They're saying 4 to 5 meetings per year, and attendance at their annual conference and their labor relations seminar.
So I'm happy to share the responsibility if any colleagues wants to. Where is their annual meeting?
The conference moves around the province, although lately has been in Blue Mountain. Their Board of Directors meetings tend to be held at an airport area hotel.
Okay. No one's budging. Okay, I'll do it, I guess. So do we have someone going to put forward a motion, putting my name forward as the nominee? Ms. Muller? Great, thank you. Councillor Lee, you can second that if you want. Well, no one else is budging. It's, painful. All in favor? Any contrary? Okay. Not quite. Yeah, carried unanimously. Okay. Blue Mountain. That'll be great. And let me guess, it's not in December. It's not when there's snow. It's in the summer. Yeah. Okay. Great. We have a written submission for number 13. We've approved that. Number 15. Again, I gather there is a typo, Tony, or something that needs to be corrected on. That's the operating budget variance.
Yes, Mr. Chair. It makes reference to the parking enforcement surplus of 3.2 million. That was a preliminary surplus. The actual number, as stated in report number 16, is 3.9.
Yep.
So we would just respectfully ask that that number be changed on page 2 and page 10 of the report.
With that, are there any questions, colleagues? If not, a motion to approve item number 15, Mayor Tory, seconded Councillor Hart. All in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. That takes us over to item number 17, which is the Toronto Police, or the 2017 capital budget variance report for the Toronto Police Service, ended December 31st, 2017, and there's one deputation, and that's Derek Moran. And again, Derek, 5 minutes, and we'll give you the 1 minute warning.
So in this report, it says, by implementing an administrative penalty system for parking violations, the City of Toronto, as well as the Province of Ontario, will ensure that parking bylaw matters are resolved through a streamlined process administered by the city without the requirement of utilizing a court process under the Provincial Offences Act. You know, Chair Pringle, the administrative penalty system came up at the last French language committee. I don't know if you're aware of this, but this is the summary of an item on the agenda submitted by the Vice Chair. In recent weeks, a media outlet reported the fact that henceforth, Francophones will no longer be guaranteed access to services in French when they want to dispute parking violations with the City of Toronto. This service is no longer provided by the province, but is being delegated to the city and therefore is no longer subject to the French Languages Services Act 2006. When questioned by the media, Susan Pape was identified as a spokesperson for the city. Ms. Pape referred to a new municipal process, the administrative penalty system, and suggested that individuals could use interpreters at their own expense. The French Language Services Commissioner confirms that an investigation has been opened into this file pursuant to a citizen complaint. Take notice, this is from the Supreme Court of Canada in R versus Tran, 1994. This is the first appeal heard by this court in which the right to interpreter assistance guaranteed by Section 14 of the Charter has been directly in issue. Section 14 provides as follows: a party or witness in any proceedings who does not understand or speak the language in which the proceedings are conducted or who is deaf has the right to the assistance of an interpreter. So after I spoke about this at the French Language Committee, after I left City Hall, I walked up to police headquarters here and dropped off a letter for Toronto Police Services Board Chair Andy Pringle, which said this: "Hi, Chair Pringle, how are you? I wish to have as an item to speak on at the next Toronto Police Services Board meeting what was discussed at the most recent French Language Committee at Toronto City Hall as it appears the corporation of the City of Toronto operating as John Tory is not complying with Section 14 of the Constitution Act 1982 in regards to their unconstitutional administrative monetary penalty system. I respectfully direct you, Chair Pringle, to have this as an item on the agenda of the next Toronto Police Services Board meeting. God bless Her Majesty the Queen. Long live Her Majesty the Queen by Derek Moran, sole living beneficiary. This is the response I got back from Carleen Bennett. Good morning, Derek. In response to your letter to Chair Pringle and further to my email to you dated February 9th, 2018, the Chair has reviewed your request to make a deputation at the next board meeting, which will be February 22nd, regarding the City of Toronto French Language Committee's non-compliance with the Section 14 of the Constitution Act. And I just want to stop there and point out that at no point did I say that they're not complying. I said possibly the City of Toronto is not complying. It was determined that your request does not meet the criteria to make a deputation to the board. Further, that is perhaps more appropriate for the City of Toronto to consider this issue. If you wish, you may contact the City of Toronto City Clerk's Office, who are still defrauding me $5 by way for Freedom of Information Act. And email address, thank you, Carleen Bennett. I have no idea why you wouldn't let me speak on that matter, Chair Pringle. And as I mentioned to...
Derek, congratulations. You found an innovative way of doing it by fitting it in just in the line of the budget discussion.
So as I said to Mayor Tory, I didn't come here last month. You know, I wouldn't miss this gong show for the world, but I came down with the flu the night before. And Scarborough and Executive Committee, I told Mayor Tory, and you're not going to believe this, he started laughing when I said this, that I was going to respectfully, because of this, not letting me initially speak about this, respectfully ask you to resign from the board for this is something in the public's interest. Hey, he's laughing. Mayor Tory's laughing again. Can you believe that?
He's a very happy guy.
Well, like you said, he's a politician too, right?
That's right.
So, I mean, it's rather awkward for me to say this because, you're my favorite chair at these board meetings, but I'm still waiting for Carleen Bennett because a week afterwards, I emailed her and said, by the way, what are the criteria? You know what I mean? Like if Desmond Cole had written ahead of time to avoid that whole situation that happened, like, hey, can I speak on the DeFonte Miller case in advance? My guess is that you would have denied that also. So, you should be a little bit more... If you're not going to be more liberal in what we can write in advance to not put ourselves in that position, he could have been hurt by those two officers, you know what I mean? Instead, he was just gently assaulted. So,
Derek, thank you very much.
Is that my 5 minutes?
Like 4 seconds, but I'm not.
All right.
But
think about it. I like you, Chair Pringle, but think about resigning along with Councillor Lee.
I think about it frequently, but listen, Derek, thank you very much. I'd ask my colleagues if they have any questions of Derek.
You could be Mayor Tory's chief of staff again.
Thank you, Derek, for that. And we'll look forward to hearing you again in a minute, but you did really, really just nicely nip that in something that I couldn't say wasn't on topic. It's getting there. With that, may I have a motion to approve item number 17, which is the 2017 capital budget variance report for the Toronto Police Service. Councillor Hart, seconded Councillor Lee. All in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. It pains me, but item number 21 has a deputation, and that is Derek Moran. Now, I've reset the time, 5 minutes.
You're a good sport, Chair Pringle.
Thank you.
So he's been under a lot of heat recently, and it seems like he's left. But I was going to say something nice about Chief Saunders. 2 months ago, you left early, and Councillor Lee here, for whatever reason, felt the need to continually call me Mr. Derek Moran. And I just want to thank Chief Saunders, because if you go back and watch the tape, at hour 3, minute 43, 49 seconds, when I say notice a mistake, the Crown is the surety for the person I am, Chief Saunders kind of sits there like this. And when I said that, he nodded. You watch the tape, it seems like he's agreeing with me, and he does this hand gesture, like, yeah, you're right, Crown is the surety for the person you have. So I just want to say thank you to Chief Saunders. He's not here, though. But so in this report, there's something called in it, Chart of Police Claims, were historical contact data relevant. It mentions about the charter, breaches of the charter, specifically section 7, 8, 9, 10A, and B. Oh, geez, you know, perfect timing.
You missed the compliment to you, Chief Saunders.
10A and B and 15. So what I noticed in this is section 8, because really, who reads this stuff? You know, lay people out there don't read the Constitution. Who works for the government actually reads this stuff? So I want to speak about section 8. This is the Salhani's Police Manual of Arrest, Seizure, and Interrogation. It's page 124. Section 8 of the Charter of Rights guarantees everyone the right to be secure against unreasonable search and seizure. This section was not included in the Canadian Bill of Rights of 1960 and was probably taken from the Fourth Amendment of the American Constitution. There are, however, important differences between the two provisions. The main difference is that the Fourth Amendment requires a warrant to be issued before a search may be conducted. An important difference between the Fourth Amendment of the American Bill of Rights and Section 8 of the Charter is that the Fourth Amendment specifically requires a police officer, before conducting a search, to obtain a search warrant based upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. The Charter does not specifically require a peace officer to obtain a search warrant before conducting a search. However, in Hunter versus Southam Incorporated, the Supreme Court of Canada said that Section 8 creates a presumption that a warrantless search is prima facie unreasonable. Police officers seeking to justify a warrantless search are required to establish that it was not feasible to obtain a warrant in the circumstances of that case. Unless the search of a person is an incident of lawful arrest, neither the common law nor the criminal code gives a police officer the right to search anyone found in a public place, like police headquarters, or on the premises where a search is being conducted. This means that a person may only be searched after he has been lawfully arrested and only for the purpose of discovering weapons in the detainee's possession in order to ensure the safety of the police, the detainee and other persons, or for the purpose of discovering evidence related to the reason for the arrest in order to preserve it and prevent its disposal by the detainee. Cloutier versus Langlois, 1990, Supreme Court of Canada. Now, with great honor, I just want to tell everyone, Marianne Wright was there. Chris Langenfeld read to Justice Jill Copeland 2 months ago in Chris Langenfeld versus the Toronto Police Services Board and Chief Mark Saunders from this very, book. And I just want to tell Chris, who's standing on the sidewalk afraid to be arrested if he steps onto the property, that thank you, it means a lot to me. So in regards to Section 7 mentioned in this chart of police claims, Section 7 deals with the security of the person. And there's a lot of misinformation out there about what exactly security of the person actually means in Section 7. And one could first go check the Federal Interpretation Act for the definition being used, Section 35(1). In every enactment, security means sufficient security, and sureties means sufficient sureties. You know, the Crown is a surety for the person I have. And when those words are used, one person is sufficient, therefore, unless otherwise expressly required. That doesn't make much sense, but the French definition being used there are cochon ou cochonnement. So if you want to retranslate that bit into English, you can see what the intention of the Canadian Parliament was at the time. This is from the Supreme Court of Canada in the Corporation of Aubert Gallion versus Roy, 1892. Charters creating a monopoly or granting a franchise, it is true, are, as argued by the appellants, strictissimi juris. That's a Latin law term. And there's a definition in Black's Law Dictionary for that, of the strictest right or law to be interpreted in the strictest manner. This term was usually applied to certain statutes, especially those imposing penalties or restraining natural liberties. There's also a maxim of law regarding that. The nature of the contract of suretyship is strictissimi juris and does not endure or should not be extended from thing to thing, from person to person, or from time to time. And the definition for strictissimi juris in Black's Law Dictionary, of the strictest right or law to be interpreted in the strictest manner. This term was usually applied to certain statutes, especially those imposing penalties or restraining natural liberties.
Derek, thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions of Derek? If not, Derek, thank you. Councillor Lee? No? Okay.
Can someone
Derek?
tell Chief Saunders what I said about him while he's gone?
Very praiseworthy.
Maybe you can watch the tape afterwards, right?
Yeah.
You're welcome, Chief Saunders.
So again, colleagues, that's item number 21, the civil litigation proceedings where historical contact data is relevant or at issue. It's really a motion to receive that. May I have a motion? Councillor Lee, seconded. Councillor Hart, all in favor? Any contrary? I think that's it. Is there any other business? Does that take care of everything, John? If no other business, let me just again, Councillor Hart, welcome you. And this was actually a fairly timely meeting. Just don't get your hopes up always. And Councillor Lee, let me just again thank you very much for all that you have done for us and for the Toronto Police Service. We appreciate it, and we wish you all the best in your upcoming endeavors.
And I pass the baton on to Councillor Hart.
You can.
To carry the...
We'll rely on you on purchasing computer and technical issues like that, Councillor Hart. Okay, a motion to adjourn, Councillor Lee, seconded Mr. Jeffers. All in favor? Any contrary? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate your support and being here.